When Meta first offered Asgards Wrath 2 as a free game for every Quest 3, I didn't really get it. Why this game? Let's not forget the first game is PCVR only, and the name Asgards Wrath I would guess is not a well-known brand or IP outside of VR. So why Asgards? Well, after 24 hours of playing Asgards Wrath 2, I can safely say this sets a new bar for what I believe Quest users can expect to experience when they put on a standalone VR headset. And that goes for both Quest 2 and Quest 3. Developers Sanzaru Games may have just made one of the most impressive VR games I've played in recent years, for many reasons, but don't get me wrong, there is some negatives, and I definitely came across some bugs which I have reported directly to Sanzaru due to having early access, but they have assured me these bugs have been flagged and fixed for tomorrow's launch. But the sheer scope of this game and the complexity of some of these levels make me think they will be hard at work fixing some bugs you guys come across for quite some time after the game launches tomorrow. So with that out of the way, please like and subscribe if you enjoy the video, and let's get on with the review of Asgards Wrath 2. The story and gameplay is mainly about getting revenge on Loki after he tricks you into helping him escape a virtual prison, which he leaves you in, and the Sisters of Fate are not happy with how everything is playing out. And now you must embody 4 mortal heroes and put things right and eventually beat Loki. Now I like the decision the developers have made to tell the story via VR cutscenes. Unfortunately they're not interactable, which I think would have been pretty cool with some quick time events, but otherwise it's very satisfying and much more immersive than say watching a 3D screen. On your journey you'll have 5 followers, integral to the story. I've yet to unlock the 5th however, but there is so far a panther, a falcon, a monkey and a hippo, and they can all transform into a human body shape or their animal form, and they all have traits and abilities you will need for each area to solve the puzzles to progress. And man, some of these puzzles are a massive head scratcher. Not since the water temple in the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time have I felt so stumped. They can also fight for you at any time. All you need to do is call on them and they will pop out of thin air and attack. They do have health bars and their own special moves, which you need to unlock via a skill tree, but I'll get onto that more in a minute. They'll also help you access wider areas of the map, by swimming or flying, or as a way of covering lots of ground on the back of the panther, which by the way, I've yet to get bored with summoning. Every time she pops up and roars, I absolutely love it. Now I do have some more to say on gameplay, but let's move on to presentation because I know some of you guys want to know exactly what this looks like inside the headset. Well, I'm pleased to say the graphics in Asgards Wrath 2 are very impressive for a couple of reasons, and those are detail and scale. Now when I say details, it's a number of things working together to give you something quite impressive. On Quest 3 the frame rate appears absolutely solid most of the time, with Quest 2 only suffering some of the time. The details in the characters, your armour and the weapons are really impressive, and you can tell there's been so much work put into this. The animals, the gods, your followers, the enemy, all of this is impressive, but the scale changes are absolutely brilliant. And the speed at which it all happens is really impressive too. For example, 90% of the game you'll spend at a human's perspective. Then at certain times you have to become a god looking down and helping figure out the puzzles. Then there's other times when you go back to being, say, human form and you're looking up at these gigantic gods, and it's absolutely amazing in VR. Now I am worried about blowing up expectations, but there's certain parts of this that really do remind me of God of War. Like for the first time you see the World Serpent. But oh my gosh, to experience something of that scale in VR, which is what we have with Asgards Wrath 2, is something you just don't forget. When you enter some of these levels, you cannot help but take a moment and simply look around. There's so much work put into this. It's honestly staggering and pretty hard to fault when you realise the scope of the game ahead of you. There was more than a few times I was impressed, but none more than when I played the chapter called The Might of the Lioness. I was chasing an absolutely massive animal pulling a world through the sand, and at the top of that world was the god Sakmet. Riding on the back of the panther Saber, we ran underneath and in between the legs of this giant beast, and then I had to use my whip sword to leash my way onto the top and then work my way through the level. And there I had my first god scale boss fight on top of this temple. That entire segment will stay with me for quite some time, because in that moment when everything is happening and the amazing music, which is throughout the entire game, I completely forgot I was using a quest. This is a AAA game on mobile hardware. Now it's time to go a bit more back into gameplay, and my expectations of what this game was going to be kept changing as I played, but I think I'm happy with my thoughts on it now. Asgards Wrath 2 is a VR RPG puzzler first and foremost, with a lesser focus on combat. I say this because at any given time, you can actually have a fight, but this will heavily change from player to player because there is no lack of enemies, because when you leave an area, they actually respawn. And you might be into high leveling your character with XP, but in my experience, I did the fights I had to, and the ones forced upon me, and this was enough to complete the mortal character skill tree, but not so much my followers. As I mentioned earlier, you can actually upgrade these characters as well, and they all include finishing moves. So when an enemy is down or on his knees, you can then select a follower and watch something really cool happen. When it comes to the combat, it does at first feel like a sword waggler. Sure, you can parry and block, but for most of the first chapter, you can simply lay waste to the enemies with ease. But as you unlock new weapons and abilities, such as the sword that transforms into a leash, the enemies get tougher, with full body shields to break before you can do any damage to them. You'll also come across one enemy whose job is to constantly regenerate the health of all the others, and as the game progresses, the combat gets a lot tougher, which was pleasing. You will also eventually unlock a shield, which you'll have to use to shield bash the enemy to create openings, and there's lots of mini boss fights. I say mini, some of them are absolutely huge too, and they also require you to perform certain actions to reveal weak points. All in all, the combat is satisfying, and that's without mentioning the God of War-like axe, which can be upgraded as well and manipulated by your hands in midair. There's a certain upgrade which allows you to leave magical versions of the axe itself just spinning in midair, and if you get these positioned in the right place, these can cause more damage over time to the enemy. And the very best bit is how the game changes all over again when you get to the next chapter and unlock a new hero to embody. Not only do your weapons change, meaning your playstyle has to change with it, you'll be greeted with a new world and a change of scenery from the pastel yellows of the desert now becomes a rich jungle with new animals to fight, and it honestly refreshed my attention to the game, energizing me to want to keep playing, because there is times you will get puzzle fatigue. Many times throughout playing, I felt the game simply had too many of these areas, making it feel like your hard work isn't justly rewarded, and sometimes after 2 or 3 hard puzzles, you would go through the next door only to be greeted by yet another puzzle. This is one of my criticisms, but I also think it's incredible how most of them are pretty unique. Your weapons like the sword and axe play a part in puzzle solving too. There's time switches, wall running, star constellation puzzles, and then there's the god-sized puzzles. It's honestly crazy how the developers kept creating new ideas to challenge players in VR, but I do feel it might fatigue some of you that are expecting more action than puzzle solving. Once you complete a chapter and unlock new heroes, you can of course go back to the previous hero to play more side quests that you may have missed in favour of story progression. But for this review, I kept pushing forward with the story. Now before I get to my summary, I need to let you know that Asgards Wrath 2 only takes up 32GB of storage, and the game also has its own roguelike filled with exclusive loot, daily rewards and a multiplayer leaderboard. To summarise my time with Asgards Wrath 2, so far I can happily say this is absolutely a must buy for all Quest users, and for me at least, stands as one of the best games I've played not only on Quest, but in all of VR, and I can't wait to play more. Thanks for watching this review, and if this video has helped you in any way, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.